All right. Well, let's get this started. Season 4. Welcome to Days of Learning podcast. My name is David Nelson, and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague Yvonne Greer. Hello, Yvonne Greer.
Hi, David. How's it going?
Oh man, I was so excited to come back to this season of Days of Learning and back to the kitchen, and always good to see you and to be working with you and working around this idea of the idea of back to the kitchen, diabetes, heart disease, and the idea of salt and spices today. So we're going to talk about some of that to begin with. But, I want to hear if you could tell everybody a little bit about your background, Yvonne. Who are you? You've been doing this for a while, but tell us who you are and what you stand for.
Well, I'll start by I am a homegrown product of the Milwaukee area, born and raised here in Milwaukee. And I always say my lineage, daughter of Louise McKinney and daughter of Henry Allen, aka Abdul Wali Sulaki. And I have been raised in a family that cherishes nutrition from a very young age. They also was my grandfather and grandmother, and it actually was my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. They had a farm outside of Milwaukee in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And I was one of those 5-year-olds that had to go out into the farm. And they didn't put me to work at 5 years old, but I was at the farm seeing everything being done. And I used to say, I'm a city girl. Why am I out here in the country? But as we got older, they did put me to work, and I was able to plant and weed and harvest and everything from the time they put me out in the field, which probably was about 7 or 8, all the way until we were in high school. And so there was times when all our plans was canceled because we were all trying to get out of it, and we had to go out in the country and harvest. But I now appreciate that. And I think because of all that, it made me so intrigued about food and eating and why we have to keep eating. And that brought me to dietetics. And from dietetics, I went into a heart referral center, and at St. Luke's was on the heart transplant team. But yet so many people from the community could not afford to purchase diet material. That took me to the health department. And after 22 years of being at the health department, I launched out on my own with my full-time private practice business, Why Eat Right, nutritional consultant for healthy living, which I have enjoyed. And now I'm 10 years with Why Eat Right and still going strong. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's kind of it's a testament to your fortitude, and I love your stories of going out to the country, which is now the suburbs of Oak Creek, and talking about all the things that you've done in that area. I want to talk about Why Eat Right, Yvonne. Tell us about what it is and why it's so important to have a nutritional consulting service like you have. What are some of the things that you're engaged with?
Well, Why Eat Right, and the why is for Yvonne, but when I put that together, it's like, okay, if I had to tell someone why eat right, then that's my mission, nutritional consultant for healthy living. This idea of, how do you eat to live? That was very, very key as I was growing up. And I have done many, many workshops within the community because, again, I feel like, I'm here as a coach. I'm here as someone that can share, my knowledge, but I always say it's about you. It's about the individual. It's not about me. It's about what people choose to, how people choose to eat, what they choose to select. And there's so many choices out here. Some of the community, the people that I tend to work with, they do not have access to a dietitian. So that's one of my major goals, is for them to have access to a dietitian, to be able to, learn how nutrition can impact your life. And right now, I'm not only doing individual presentation workshops, cooking demonstrations, so the hands-on pieces of it, but I'm also leading community-wide efforts to really, as a system, have a collective impact on changing and developing a culture of health and wellness, so that healthy eating is the easy choice. Healthy eating is the normal choice. It's the way to go. But because there are so many, barriers, social determinants of health, some barriers, like access to healthy grocery stores in the community, some populations are at more risk than others of not having the healthy food choices, and it's almost in survival mode when it comes to nutrition. They're now coining a new phrase. They used to say food security. Now they're saying nutrition security, because the diet quality is starting to be shown to be so important. It's not enough just to eat. The quality of what you eat is starting to show that it makes a really big difference in your health. David, you're muted.
After 2 years, you think I by now, but thank you for that, Yvonne. I'd just be talking to myself, which is not an uncommon thing. I appreciate what you're saying there, and I want to deconstruct this a little bit, because you're saying you work with individuals. Yes. And you said this earlier today. It's this idea of allowing people to speak their truth without fear of being chastised for how they live their lives.
Yes.
But you're also talking about the health of communities and equity around nutrition quality, quantity of food. So you're really running the gambit there. Do I have that right?
Yes, you do have that right, because sometimes we think it's all an individual choice. And it's not always an individual choice. It's sometimes an environmental choice. It's what neighborhood you live in, what opportunities you have to eat healthy, and what other struggles you have around being able to get the healthier foods, such as if you have housing disparities, such as if you are having a lot of health problems, and having to choose how you're going to spend that money, and then also having to make those dollars stretch. So sometimes the healthier food are more expensive. Not always, there's ways that you can plan and budget and that type of thing to get the foods that you need. But yet, if you don't have all of those skills, and if you really are trying to stretch the food, sometimes you are more worried about making sure everyone gets something to eat versus the quality of that food. So there is some things when it comes to equity that really causes people to not be able to eat the healthiest foods that they can.
And we're going to talk about that with our guest today, but you bring up such an important point about the types and kinds of food, not only that you consume, but what you have available in your communities. We know that there is inequities in communities, and this disproportionately impacts communities of color. Is that correct?
That is correct. Many of the grocery stores, the superstores that have the lowest prices as well are in the suburbs or further out, and within the inner city communities, they don't have the same supermarkets and that type of thing. So their access is less, and then sometimes the cost is actually more. And so unless you have transportation, now you bring in another aspect. Unless you have transportation to get to those areas, many times you have to rely on what's in your neighborhood. And so many times that's lower quality, high carb type foods, lower nutrition.
Yeah, it's the notion of it might be available for what we would call fast food or heavily processed food. And I want to talk about that today. You know, normally at this time, we would be having a Back to the Kitchen video. And we will have it. We are hoping that we will have it at some time during the show today, but if not, we'll make it available to everybody. And our topic for today on this Back to the Kitchen video is hold the salt and add flavor with herbs and spices.
Right.
Yvonne, I want you to talk about this. I think you know this. I have high blood pressure. I have some hypertension. And I went to the doctor today, in fact, and they applauded me for controlling the blood pressure, which is that issue of it can be that silent killer. So many people don't know. I actually have a blood pressure cuff and I can monitor it. But many people don't know that. But one of the things that the physician's assistant said to me today, make sure you keep eating that lower salt diet, Nelson. And I appreciate the reminder. I want to ask you as a dietitian and as someone who enjoys food, why is it important to think about our salt intake?
Well, Ed, the more I work in this area, the more I learn. And I have been doing some workshops and presentation to a Healthy Heart Ambassador program. And some of the analogies that I have been using has really hit home on why sodium needs to be restricted. So as you increase your salt intake, you increase your fluid intake. You can think of it in a couple of different ways, but I know the way that is in our curriculum. I'm just going to say that one first. And I'll say the other one is the one that I personally use as well, is the idea of if you think of a water hose, and before you put any pressure or water in that water hose, it's just limp and it's not stiff or anything. As you increase that water in that water hose and it keeps getting higher and higher, that hose gets stiffer and stiffer and stiffer, and the pressure inside there gets more and more and more. So sometimes if you turn it all the way up, that water will just shoot out, and that hose can go everywhere. Well, that can be almost be like if you were going to have a aneurysm or a stroke, and that blood vessel bursts because of that pressure. The more fluid sodium you eat, the more fluid, the more pressure in that artery wall. And that is one key. The same thing as if you were thinking of a balloon and you just blowing it up. At first it's really limp, it's really not tight. And as you keep blowing it up, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And all of a sudden, what happens to that balloon?
Well, Rose.
And that can happen inside an artery, whether it's in your head for a stroke or in your heart. And you can have, blood vessel. You can have it in the legs. There's different ways that pressure can affect you. And it actually can also cause your veins to change. And then you have some problems with circulation and nerve damage. So there's so many things that can happen. And then you go back and say, okay, so how could you prevent it? Cut down on the salt, cut down on holding all that fluid, eat healthy. Don't do other things that can affect your arteries, like cigarette smoking. And, so there's other things that can affect your artery, but sodium is one of them. But guess what? This is the good part. You don't have to give up flavor to cut down on salt.
You bring up, we're going to get to that about the flavor. I know that we have sophisticated audience members, and they're very insightful. And we know that the salt is related to the fluid intake, and it relates to the blood pressure, which can cause issues of the heart. But I know someone's going to say, but Miss Yvonne, I don't add any salt to my food. Can you speak into that, please?
Yes. When studies were done to say where are people really getting the most sodium is. Now, salt is sodium and chloride. So salt has part sodium, but the actual mineral that is causing the problem is the sodium. So yeah, what you add in salt can add, but they found that almost 77%, almost 80% of the sodium you get out of your diet is from processed foods and restaurant foods, meaning foods that's already been prepared, food that already has salt, but also sodium preservatives in there.
Oh,
So you're getting foods that have abundance of sodium in it, not just salt, sodium, and yet they're already made for you. You can't do anything about it. Some people will rinse some things, that type of thing, but if you get bologna or some things that's high in sodium, you can't take it out. Soups, you really can't take it out. So if you were cooking those same foods at home and you controlled how you seasoned them and how much salt you add, they're saying you only add 11% of the sodium that you get by sprinkling a couple of little salt at home. 12% is naturally in foods.
yeah.
So you're talking about what you have in foods and what you sprinkle. If that was all low sodium food, it would only be 22% of the sodium that you're taking in. The rest of it would be from processed foods, box mixes, bologna, sausages, a brine solution. Sometimes we get chicken products. We don't even know that there's a salt solution added to the chicken.
Right.
I don't want to name the chicken, but there's a popular chicken out there, cutlet out there that people are getting. And it's got over 1,000 milligrams in one chicken patty. And one of my clients said that they ate 2 at one time. So that's 2,000 milligrams of sodium in one one meal. And you're only supposed to have 2,300 for the entire day.
Yeah, and you can't get away from it. And I like what you said there, and whether you know it or not, but you used the word control. And I think that gives some people, it gives all of us, not some people, it gives all of us power. So, we talk about the idea of understanding our food, where it comes from and what you do with it. So give us a really brief primer on how do I find out how much salt is in my food?
Okay. All foods that are purchased are supposed to have a nutrition facts label on them. If they've been processed and things like that, they have a nutrition fact label. The only foods that don't really have a nutrition facts label is fresh foods. So fresh fruits and vegetables that you get from the vegetable area does not have a nutrition facts label. Your fresh meats don't have a nutrition facts label. Some voluntarily put that on, but any box mix, any type of processed food like tomato sauce and different things have to have a nutrition facts label on there, and then you can look on there and see how many milligrams of sodium that you're getting. Keep in mind, people start saying, oh, I'm looking for salt. You're going to see the word sodium. And when they start saying things like sodium free, that has a standard of identity wherein sodium free can be no more than 5 milligrams or less. If it says very low sodium, it's less than 35 milligrams of sodium, or low sodium, less than 140. When it says sodium, there's a standard. When it says reduced salt or salt free, reduced salt has to be kind of like only maybe 25 milligrams. 25% less, 25% less. So it doesn't really say how much is in there in the first place. It just says 25% less. So you have to look at the label, see how much sodium you're getting. Same thing if it says light. Light only means 50% less than the regular.
That's still good.
The regular could be, sky high. We looked at some products and we found that if you're looking at something like a soup, a canned soup, it can be a range from 450 all the way up to 1,200 milligrams in one soup. But what people don't realize, and I'm going to make sure I say this, when you look at those numbers on the label, you have to look at the serving size.
How many servings?
Yeah, that's the key. Some people will look at it, oh, I'm looking at it. And if they don't look at the serving size, they don't know exactly how much sodium they're getting in their portion, because they can look at if that half a cup or whatever is on that serving size, is that what you're eating, or are you eating twice that amount?
Right. Or more.
Or more, or more. Yeah, yeah.
So I want to talk about this because I'm curious to talk about this idea of herbs and spices. All right. So let's go over some of the things that you should say. Hey, wait a minute. Hold on a minute. Don't we have a question of the day, Miss Yvonne?
We have a great question of the day.
Okay.
And this question of the day was because I was taking stock in the herbs and spices that I have. And when we have our video that we're going to be showing, you will see on my table all these herbs and spices I pulled out of my cupboards. And I actually counted up 26 that I have regularly that I use. And my question of the day to you is, how many herbs and spices do you use? So that would be something that if you can add that to the chat or
Yes.
post it, that you can get some ideas of, just how many that you use. I remember at one time, and as a child, I used to sit in the kitchen and watch my mother cook. She would have this beautiful spice record on the wall. I thought it was decorations. I didn't know people really used them. But I also saw salt, pepper, and seasoning salt. So I thought that's what people use, salt, pepper, seasoning salt. It wasn't until I was grown that I realized that there is so many flavors that you can meld together. The only thing is that you have to learn how to use them.
Yes.
And it's not hard. It's saying if you want to start small, and then you'll get the flavor of them and know which ones you like more of, which ones you like less of.
So let's talk about that. What are some of the things that I love that. So if you're joining us live, if you want to put in the chat how many spices, and I'm fortunate, I think that I have 3 that I can think of. And I won't count salt and pepper, but I would count pepper for a spice, but I won't count salt. My wife does most of the cooking, but Yvonne, talk to us about some of the spices that you think that we might want to have in our cupboard.
Right, and some of the spices that I'm going to bring up are some that they're not exotic. They're things that, I think everyone should be able to have. There's a couple that I might mention only because they're a little different, but allspice. Allspice is a blend of a lot of different seasonings. Like your ginger, it's got a little bit of clove in there, a little nutmeg in there. So it's got a little different spice to it. And many times you're using it in berries. You can use it in, baked squash. So some people don't use baked squash. Some people have put it in bean dishes. What I have used it on is when I make my baked apple.
Mm-hmm.
Very tasty. And then also, and this is different, I have put it on roast beef, like when I'm cooking the roast, and I add my other seasonings and flavorings, add a little bit of allspice on there. It will make it have a flavor that comes out. It won't taste like spice, but it gives it a little bit extra, and it blends with all the other. And remember, with spices, you want them to blend together, so you don't overpower any one spice. Your cayenne pepper. Your cayenne pepper definitely is hot. It gives that hot tinge to it, but it's very healthy. It's loaded with antioxidants, and you can use it sparingly to give that little boost to chili, to many different things. One thing that they have on there, which I have not tried, I have made my popcorn, and I have used a Cajun spice.
Yes.
And it gives it a little bit of a kick. I also have added a little bit of the cayenne pepper when I make my homemade trail mixes.
Ooh.
And that also gives it that extra little flavor that really brings out, and it's good It's good for, because I always say it's good for your sinuses. Cinnamon has been one that is a very good spice for applesauce and for also fruit stews and that type of thing. But it's also been shown to be good in like coffee, when you make a coffee or a hot chocolate. Yeah, and it's actually been shown to be good for diabetics. When we start looking at cumin, the cumin spice, it's a Mediterranean spice. It actually helps lower inflammation in the body, and it's good in dips and sauces. And if you were looking at the show last year, and I made that black bean corn and quinoa salad, that cumin was put in there, and it really made it have a nice flavor. So it can be used with like a curry, that type of thing. You can use it with that. That brings us to the curry powder. And that curry powder is a blend of different herbs and spices. And it does have your turmeric in there. And again, that curry can be used in, we usually hear it in curry chicken, curry goat, but as a almost like a Jamaican kind of dish, but at the same time, it's used in a lot of stews and a lot of flavors. But they also say it can be used definitely on chicken, but also in tuna salad, chicken salad, yeah, and some major salads, and on. I haven't tried it. I'm going to try it on sweet potatoes.
Yes.
Yeah. Ginger is a spice that can be used on many different fruits and melon, but many people are now using a lot of fresh ginger because it actually is a very good for your lungs and your sinuses, and it boosts your immune system. And so a lot of people are making ginger teas, but it's definitely used in Oriental food. So I'm going to make, maybe in the future, making my homemade chicken stir fry recipe with fresh ginger added. And then nutmeg, I'm going to just mention a few that I have. Nutmeg, paprika, of course, you know, pepper. We mentioned the turmeric before, and the turmeric is a flavor that is kind of, I would say, milder flavor, but it can be used on eggs. It has a yellow color. So you can make yellow rice with it, which gives it just a little bit different, but don't do like me. When I first started using turmeric, I didn't see the water in the rice turn colors. So I kept adding more. I had neon rice. Don't think the color of the water has to change. Just put some in there and stir it and make sure, and then you can see how much you may want. I had neon rice. And the last one that is new, and I was trying to really, because I've never had it, it's called, I think it's called Za'atar. It's Z-A apostrophe A-T-A-R. And it gets its flavor noted from dry sumac berries.
Okay.
So it's tart. It's got a sour flavor, and sometimes they say it reminds you of a lemon and can be substituted for lemon in recipes.
Okay.
So that's one that I'm going to go to the spice store and see. That's going to be my new adventure. But the big thing that we're saying is that because there's so many flavors and so many spices, and many that I have not even mentioned, like your sage and your oregano, and my favorite that I use in a lot of my recipe is thyme.
Yes.
Spice. To me, when you put a little thyme in the water of cabbage or before you cook your greens, it makes it seem like it has meat, and you don't really need to put meat in there. So that little thyme spice.
And
so
I'm just not spelled with T-I-M-E either.
No, it's T-H-Y-M-E. So my thing is that we can have flavorful food, an abundance of flavor in our foods. And then if you had just a teeny bit of salt, then you can use the teeny bit of salt. But you are not, you don't have to feel that you can't have flavor and enjoy every bit of the foods that you eat.
Yvonne, I want to highlight something for the audience, and I know you'll agree with me, because I have always thought like spices would be good in meats and stews and soups. But you're talking about things like fruits and vegetables, and even I love baked apple, and I consider that a dessert. And so you're not using extra sugar, but you're using it. And the notion that some of these, like cumin, can be good for inflammation and is healthful for your body, not only has the components of of tasting good, but it is good for you.
Yeah, I want to see if Richard is trying to tell us that the video
Is
is
the video ready,
ready.
Richard? Let's roll the video.
Hello, and welcome back to the kitchen.
Thank you, Richard.
All right. Dietitian and owner of Why Eat Right, nutritional consultant for healthy living. This program is being brought to you by MCOP, the Milwaukee County Organization Promoting Prevention, the Medical College of Wisconsin, in partnership with the State of Wisconsin Chronic Disease Prevention Program through a CDC 1815 grant. Today, I will be demonstrating the first of 4 healthy recipes from the Back to the Kitchen curriculum. We will also be having a discussion segment with our featured guests, our community champions, who will share their insights on healthy eating and health promotion. I want you to remember that the Back to the Kitchen curriculum is a free downloadable guide that has workshops and recipes that is geared for the entire family. On the table, you will see a variety of herbs and spices that I use regularly in my cooking. I added up about 26. My question of today is, how many herbs and spices do you use? The recipe for today is my favorite, skillet fried cabbage. For today's recipe, we'll need a nice fresh cabbage. We'll need onion and green pepper that will be sliced. We'll need herbs and spices, which includes your garlic powder, paprika, your onion powder, pepper, and your thyme. And then we will have olive oil added to that. First, we'll need to wash all our vegetables, but for the cabbage, we just need to do one more thing. We need to take off all the outer layers of the cabbage leaves. Those leaves are the ones that's been in the element and are mostly highly contaminated with pesticides and things. So we take those off and we continue washing. Same thing, we have our green pepper. And then the outer layers of our onions. The recipe calls for 1 onion, but I've got 2 that I'm going to cut up because they're kind of on the small side. So before we start all of our chopping, we need to first prepare our water mixture. It entails 1 cup of water, 1/4 of a cup of the olive oil, and then 1/2 teaspoon of our herbs and spices. You don't have to worry about how it goes in if some spills over. This is giving you an idea about how much. That's your garlic. Heavy on that. The paprika, remember it doesn't have to be exact. I'm layering the flavor of the onion with the onion powder. And then I'm going to put in half a teaspoon of your thyme. This is fresh thyme that I got from the spice shop. Last but not least will be your pepper. And with your pepper, you may have to look and see and cut back a little bit if you don't like a lot of pepper. Okay, now we're ready to chop up our vegetables. So the first thing I do with this cabbage is I'm going to end up cutting it in two because it's going to be very hard to cut it in pieces if it's the whole cabbage. See how I keep turning it and rolling it? That way I can get it all the way through. Now you got two pieces. Turn it over flat, and then you can cut into it. And you see I have a nice big knife. I don't use my little paring knife for this job. Then turn it, and now in those bite-sized pieces, doesn't have to be real and a little bit little. So I did half of the cabbage, put it in a nice big bowl. Now, if you're only cooking for one, that might be enough for you. But I like to make a lot because I love my cabbage leftovers. Yeah, after you cut it in half once, much easier to cut. Okay, we are now ready to chop up our green pepper and our onion. And what I did for the green pepper, I already cut it in half. You only need half, but I wanted to let people see the inside of the green pepper because I had a young lady once told me, I never seen the inside. And knowing that there is seeds in there, and I will be cutting all of the seeds out, and that white membrane, I will be cutting those out. Do it in half like that, where now you see that white membrane, and I can just cut that out. So all I do is the same kind of process I did. And people see this is just the way that I learned how to do things. Is to cut them in strips straight down. And I do have my nice little paring knife that I love to work with. And we're not going to cut and cube these, but to make those strips a little shorter, we're just going to take these and just cut it in half. So that's all you need for your strips. So now I'm going to cut up the onion and with the same kind of process. Cut it in half, make strips, and I'm holding it on each side just so you can see that I'm trying to keep those strips together. We are not going to dice them. I'll show you how they just come apart. In previous segments, I talked about how you keep the onion from getting into your eyes. All you need to do is turn on the cold water, put your hands and the knife underneath the water, and that cuts down on all the oils and things from the onion from getting in your eyes. And that stops that process altogether. I'm going to do this one. And again, if you do it fast enough, you won't feel the onion, because what happens is your hands will warm up and that will spread the oils coming from the onion. but it stopped it, and I'm able to get it all done. And the only reason why I'm using 2 onions is because they were small onions. Everything is added all at the same time. Your green pepper, your onion, and nothing to do separate. So let's see if our water is ready. Nice. All those seasonings and flavors are now blended together. Now we're going to add all of our cabbage. And don't worry about it becoming a big mound because it's going to cook down. Got our fryer on high as a stir fry will have it. What you need to do with the cabbage, and you just let it cook for just a couple minutes, is that you take your spoon from the bottom and you fold up. And you do that motion to try to get some of the juices from the bottom to the top. But you want to fold, folding action. And you see how some of them are starting to get covered with the liquid. That's why you keep your heat up until you have it cooked down. And you can tell that you have enough water when you fold it and you still see the liquid at the bottom, then you know you still have enough liquid. It will cook down. So sometimes you may have to add a little bit, but you stir frying, so you're not trying to steam your cabbage, you're stir frying. Once everything has been moistened, you can put a top on it and crack the top. You do not want to just have a solid top on cabbage because all of the steam has some of the sulfur and aromatic chemicals, and that can turn your cabbage brown. So cooking it without a lid or with a lid that's cracked is what you want to do to preserve that green of the cabbage. Still see water at the bottom, so I still know I have enough. This is only going to need to cook for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, depending upon how you like your cabbage. Remember my motto, eating your way to a healthy life. Even if it cooks a little longer and it gets a little softer, you will not cut off, you'll not cook off all of your nutrients. Almost see that most of the cabbage is now moistened. And once that happens, I usually turn the temperature down just a little bit so that you don't cook out all your liquid and so that you don't burn the cabbage. The only other thing I do is if I have these big membranes, I push them down to make sure they get moistened. Because sometimes you have some big membranes in your cabbage and you want to get those done as well. Now you notice I have not added in any salt to this dish. And this dish would be okay like it is. But I do have for the entire recipe, it calls for a half a teaspoon of salt. It's up to you if you want to use it. But for those who are cutting back, knowing that you use only salt-free seasonings, no extra salt added to this dish. Now, I don't know if you can see that liquid. That's just showing you that we had enough liquid in the beginning and we didn't have to add any more. And now it's just going to cook to the desired doneness. For some people, this would be almost done. Those membranes is the only thing for pushing those to the bottom. And this cabbage is almost done. The only other thing you might want to let it cook a little longer if you like your green pepper to be a little bit more done. Turn the heat down. Sure it doesn't burn. And then cabbage is done. Let's clean it up. Always amazed at how easy and quick cooking healthy food can be. So there you have it, our skillet fried cabbage made with several herbs and spices, ready to serve. Delicious and nutritious. Now let's get on with our program.
Well, thank you, Yvonne and Richard, for producing such a outstanding show. And I just got to tell you, once again, we're doing this in the afternoon and I'm hungry. So that did look good.
Yeah, I really do enjoy some of these recipes because these are recipes that I cook regularly. So when I'm cooking them, sometimes my mouth is watering as well. So when I'm looking at that finished one, I'm ready to dig in. But yes, once I started cooking cabbage, because that wasn't the way I grew up cooking cabbage, but I did make what I call recipe makeovers so that I can retain more of the nutritional value. And I can tell now, that boiling cabbage, some people like to boil cabbage, but you remember some of the nutrients are water soluble and they will go into the water. So I was trying to figure out a way to cook with much less water and retain way more of the nutrients. And then the herbs and spices coming in and lowering that salt content, that 1/4 of a teaspoon, 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. If you want that, because it's going for the whole entire thing, you still going to have a low sodium cabbage if you use it. But I would try it first without it, because a lot of times people never try things without salt and they don't know the flavor of the food.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get a good flavor of the food, you don't want to overly spoil it by adding a lot of salt. So it's a way you can cut back, cut down, and then you will know that you can have flavor without that salt. So when I say hold the salt, we're saying, yes, you can hold the salt, you can cut back. It's your way of eating, but that is a healthy recipe without having a lot of salt in it.
Yvonne, before we bring our guests on, I think it's important for us I want you to remind us, whether you have heart disease or other kind of chronic illnesses, and you need to change the way you you eat. Many people think that changing their diet means it has to hurt and it has to be painful and it has to be very bland. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is that you can start from where you're at, and you can add to, and you can add and make a priority to get those healthier items in, and you can experiment and with the things that you like to eat. It doesn't mean you have to give up. So I usually say I don't give up anything. I just make a choice not to have it as much as I used to have it. So that way you're not thinking, oh, I've got to, it's an all or nothing thing. Everything that I liked, I had to give up. There is so many ways that you can look at what you like and just make healthy makeovers wherein you change 1 or 2 ingredients and then you still have that same dish, but it just tastes healthier and it still can almost taste the same, but it's just having different ingredients. I use olive oil more as my regular oil, where in the past I thought, oh, olive oil is going to make everything taste funny. No. If you start using it, you'll get to know that for most things, you don't have that feeling. And then at the same time, I don't do certain cooking techniques that causes you to lose nutrition, so I don't deep fry a lot of things. So you don't need as much oil. And then if you're steaming and using, like I did, put the water in there and then put a little oil in there, you still have an oil fill. And that oil is important to help with the absorption of nutrients. So you don't have to feel all or nothing, and you do not have to feel deprived because if you're focusing on what you need to get in, you're not focusing on what you're not eating.
Right
You're
on.
building a healthier diet versus eliminating a lot of your building. And in that way, you're never going to feel deprived.
That's outstanding. And it's something that the whole family can participate in,
Yes.
regardless of age.
Yes.
Hey,
Many
Yvonne,
times.
thank you for bearing with us and for giving us such a long and lengthy education session today. How about if we bring our guests into
Yes, we need our guests, because they have a wealth, and we call them community champions
our
because they
champion?
are community champions. They're out there. They are promoting health and wellness. They're helping people to move along that spectrum of health. And we just need them to be able to speak on all of these things we've been talking about today.
Fantastic. So let's do that. I'm gonna introduce two of our guests, and then you're going to introduce our third guest.
Okay.
Our two guests from the American Heart Association are no strangers to the show. They've been on the show before. And today we welcome Obi Nwabuzor, MBA. She has mastered the art of being a community connector and has held roles with the nonprofit and public sector, including the American Heart Association. She has developed health strategies to improve social influencers of health in communities and has led community collaborations through programs, partnerships, and policies. Her involvement with governmental agencies and strategic alliances has resulted in Complete Streets policy and to date a $600,000 fresh food access fund. Obi is also the founder of Envision Growth, a Milwaukee-based real estate development group to build healthy people and regenerate communities. She is a member of Tempo, Milwaukee's emerging women leaders, and serves on several boards for the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, City of Milwaukee, NIDC, Malika Early Learning Center, the Friendship House of Milwaukee, and Progress Center for Black Women. Welcome, Obi Nwabuzor. And also today, joining us from the American Heart Association is Tim Nicolai, is the Senior Community Impact Director for the American Heart Association in Wisconsin, and Army brat and a graduate of Ripon College. He has been with the association for 14 years in a variety of roles. As he leads the Wisconsin Community Impact Team, they are focused on changing policies and systems from a barrier to health into a health asset. He lives in Port Washington with his wife and two children. And our last but not least guest, Yvonne.
Yes, let me pull her bio over. And I have to say, I am just so thrilled that she agreed to come on our program, because she came so recommended by two of my very, very good colleagues that I was saying, okay, I need to have her. I'm introducing Eida Berrios, and she is an RN for more than 30 years. She has been working as a nurse and a certified diabetes educator in a community health center for 26 years, with a lot of passion and commitment to provide the best quality education and support to her patients and their families and significant others. She had the privilege and honor to lead and enjoy diabetes support groups for more than 17 years and an exercise program for the past 15 years. She is very active in her community, leading and supporting events that provide health and prevention of chronic disease. Eida is a member of the American Diabetes Association, as well as the American Association of Diabetes Educators. She has 2 adult children and a 13-year-old daughter, which she enjoys riding bikes with, playing volleyball, exercising in a fun way to music, like having Zumba, and then also walking. Welcome, Eida, to this show, and I am so happy that you are here with us.
So let me start with you, Eida, because our show's title is Getting to the Heart of Diabetes, and we're going to bring all of our guests in here. But I want you to talk to us a little bit about the idea of the connection between diabetes and heart disease. Can we start with that, please?
Yeah, thank you for the invitations. It's a pleasure for me to be with the other guests. I think so. It's beautiful the talk that Yvonne brought. The connection with diabetes, they are just like a couples, like a diabetes confirms, complication connects, and then one of the complications is heart disease. Heart disease is sometimes, most of the time, is silent because patient doesn't have the symptom. They don't feel the symptom, but the problems are there. So to control the blood sugar, to be aware that those complications can come sooner or later, it is very important for the patient to know to say, how can I prevent? Because it doesn't have to happen. That's my message to my patient. That doesn't happen. We can do something, but we have to act today. Not yesterday, because yesterday already had. I want to start today. The prevention of the complications.
That's fantastic. Obi, when you hear Eida's message about prevention, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I hear making the healthy choice the easy choice, right? Like we have to look at how can we control our portion sizes, as well as, what Miss Yvonne Greer alluded to is making sure that we're actually reading our food labels and then making that in correlation to, what are our portion sizes, because that makes a difference. And that's very key to maintaining the right weight and preventing or managing diabetes.
Fantastic. And Tim, talk to us a little bit about what's going on in our area around diabetes and heart disease and in the state of Wisconsin. Just talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you have noticed in your time as a leader in this area.
Yeah, and thanks for letting us join, Dr. Nelson. I'm excited to be part of this conversation here. I think historically we've seen over the last 50 or 60 years a decrease in the rates of heart disease and stroke, which has been fantastic. But unfortunately, that decrease has reversed itself a little bit in the last few years, and the pandemic has certainly contributed to that. There was both the direct implications for cardiovascular health that COVID had, where it exacerbated or amplified or sometimes caused people to have heart conditions as a result of being infected with COVID. But it also disrupted the access to care for a lot of individuals, both because the health system was overwhelmed and because individuals were hesitant to go in and access, their typical doctor's appointments and the like. And so we've seen things like high blood pressure control decrease over the last year to 18 months. And it's really unfortunate, and we think it's going to have, without some of that prevention and quick response from community, the impact of COVID will not go away when the pandemic is quote unquote over, unfortunately.
I think I want to bring, since when you brought that up, it really reminded me when you start talking about the impact. I wanted to see what you would think about the idea of the importance of having those, because I'm always with the community champions. Having a person like Eida, I would want you to speak on the idea of, what does it mean for the community to have that connector person that can help guide them and give them directions, like on what to how to get prepared to go to the doctor. What does it mean for the community to have that person there, and how can that impact their health? Eida, could you start, and then maybe everybody else can tune in on that?
When I see a patient, I always put myself, what do I want? If I would be the patient, what do I need to know So when I go to the doctor, I use the 10 minutes or the 5 minutes that the doctor had for me because the system is so busy now that even the doctor want to spend the time. Is that they don't want. I want the patient to understand is the doctor want to spend more time, but they don't have the time. We need to understand that. So the patient needs to come prepared. What the patient need to, I always, because I am the educator, I prepare the patient to come ready for the appointments. For diabetes, they must bring the glucometer. They need to check the blood sugar. If they don't come prepared, sadly, the doctor are going to say, well, okay, the A1C is this number, you're doing okay. When sometimes it's not true. Because the blood sugar, the machine is telling you us day by day where the blood sugar numbers are. The A1C is the test that just shows you one number in the average of the past 2 months. And for us, it's just overall. That doesn't help the doctor to target to see where is the problem, what kind of treatment is best for the patient. So one thing that I always advocate, you have to check the blood sugar at least 5 days before you see the doctor. So many times, maybe 3 times, maybe 2 times, maybe 4 times, depending on what type of diabetes the patient has, depending on what the situation is economically, but they need to bring information. If they don't bring information, the appointment is not going to be successful and should be. The same with the blood pressure. If the assignment was check your blood pressure, buy a monitor, be prepared, then do it. Then do it because that information is so valuable for the patient, for the doctor to make the assessment and to give it the right treatment for that patient according to the numbers. Know about one number when they went to the appointments, and probably the number is so high when really during the day is not so high.
That's a very good point. And, when we start looking at having that person that can tell them that information, having those community connections is so important. And I know that both the Heart Association has so many different programs and different things that community people can access to be that connector person so that people get that information in advance. If you want to, either one of you want to speak to that, Tim or Obi, on some of those connector pieces. I was thinking about like the check, change, control program and some of those programs.
Yeah, and it's one of the favorite parts of my job is getting to connect organizations to resources that the Heart Association has put together, because I never want to see people reinvent the wheel if they don't have to. And so check, change, control is certainly one of those efforts where, through resources like that, we can help a church, a business, a housing complex, a library, turn those resources around and educate their congregation, their patients, their employees, their patrons, their members around things like hypertension, and help them access that information in a place where they're already comfortable, where they're already gathering. One of our guiding values is meeting people where they are. And so we're going to try to bring our resources to all of those places where people are, and at least have that initial conversation in that setting. And then certainly we can get them connected as necessary, or those organizations can help get them connected as necessary to people like Eida and organizations like 16th Street Community Health Center and the other great FQHCs and free clinics we have in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I know that I see some of my colleagues on there, and some of the churches are doing some fantastic job at actually helping their congregations and individuals to access services and to understand the information that is out there, and to promote health and wellness. now I know I wanted people to really know that, you know, some of the things we do individually, but sometimes we advocate for policy change, advocate for changes in our system that, again, and I think Obi said it, to make nutrition and the easy choice, the normal choice. And I always say a culture of health and wellness. So Obi, could you talk a little bit about that advocacy piece that I know you're working on, and I really kind of want to make sure we get that in.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, making the healthy choice, the easy choice. You know, I'm here at the Heart Association locally with our priority areas. Nutrition is one of the big ones, and access to healthier food options. And, you know, we want the healthy choice to be the default choice for kids in our community. You know, we say these things that, you know, our Milwaukee kids are sweet enough as they are. And literally the data shows that nearly 2/3 of youth living in the United States consume a sugary drink daily. And in total, US kids consume enough sugar to fill a bathtub each year. So when we think about that, we really got to be concerned about that and making sure that our kids are growing up in the way that they should, you know, being able to live a longer and healthier life. So we are advocating and working to build up a kids meal campaign, which is an effort to pass a healthy default drinks policy that would ensure that kids meals offered at Milwaukee restaurants would include healthy drinks as a default option and not the sugary drinks.
Yeah. And we have a healthy and fit kids initiative that we're doing, and we also are looking at what are those impacts that can help people have healthy, active children and have healthy meals on a regular basis. And so this fits right in. No, David, you were getting ready to comment.
Well, I just really want to go back to, and you all are such on the front lines of doing such phenomenal work. Yvonne, you haven't talked about the impact of COVID on our community. You're out there all the time. And how has that impacted people's ability to do good things with their nutrition and not be afraid of catching COVID?
Well, there's a couple different scenarios, because at the beginning, when people were getting all of this abundance of food boxes and from here, there, and different sources, people were really looking at how to cook and was really embracing the idea that, you know, we getting all this healthy fruits, vegetables, this and that, more than we ever had before. And, you know, the importance of healthy cooking and things. And that actually made people want to know more about, you know, what is it that I really need to do? How can I cook foods in a healthy way? That type of thing. As time went on, though, many of those food baskets and food giveaways stopped. And now you go to the grocery store and the prices have gone up. And so this idea of now the environment changing, where it's not looking as supportive for healthy eating and having the same amount of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and that type of food because of the cost. So it seemed like we were making 2 steps forward and we might be making some steps back. And we really don't want to see that happen. But, you know, then it's saying, okay, how can we advocate to get the healthy foods in our community so that they are affordable and so that people don't feel that they have to make a choice between healthy food and paying the rent.
Very important.
Yeah.
Very important considerations.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yvonne, for weighing in on that. Eida, I was wondering if you can comment around, you talked about being prepared, and I love that saying. But how does culture fit into the idea of what we can do to be prepared to deal with heart disease as well as diabetes?
Thank you for the question. I love it. Cultural, we're working with different people and different backgrounds. So, and that's excellent because that bring a lot of experiences. Culturally, I want to talk more about how the patients see the doctor. And I am not going to see that. I am not going to say that to the doctor. I just going to hide this information, even though I feel it, but I don't want the doctor to know that. And culturally, at least for Hispanic, the doctor is in power, and I am just tell me what to do, and I'm gonna do whatever you want me to do in front of you. But really, when I get out of the office, I am gonna do whatever I want to do. So that disconnection brings a lot of problems in the patient health, because the doctor feel like, okay, the patient is gonna do this and that, the recommendation, but when the patient come back, the health is getting worse because they didn't follow the recommendation. Why? Because probably the doctor didn't ask the patient, do you agree with that? What do you want to do? Is it something that you can do? Or this is so impossible for you? Or you are not ready to do that? All those questions are very important. Okay, and we need to address, and I always feel like this is my hands, the patient needs to be the center of the care.
Yeah.
Nobody had the power to make the patient do if they are not ready. This is the patients, and my fingers are whoever is helping them. Is the pharmacist, the nurse, the MA, the neighbor, the friends. Those are the people who helping the patient or giving the advice to the patient. But the patient should be and need to be the center of the care. And in our culture, it is holding back on that part because we feel like the doctor is right and I'm wrong. And I am telling the patient, first, the patient doesn't listen to them. They don't know how to express their feeling. What are they feeling? If they have headache, for how long they have headache, what kind of headache they have, to describe what is the situation. It's so hard many times for our people. So the doctor get confused about what are they need, what is the assessment. So my advice to the patient is always listen to yourself. Make a journal, write down what are your symptoms. Tell the truth even they don't listen to you or they don't believe what are you feeling. Just say the truth. And have the best communication that you can have with the doctor by bringing to concern to that appointment. What are the concerns? You concern, not the other provider concern. What are your main concerns? Because the time is short, we need to use the time very wisely. Okay, so I prefer the patient to say, you have 10 things that you have in your mind. What are the most important things so to address at that time? And then the other ones, make another appointment. And little by little, you are going to address all the concerns. But the most important part is patient need to listen to yourself, listen then. What they feel, describe very wisely what they feel, and say the truth. Don't hide anything. Just say the truth so the doctor can have a better assessment and they can help together. Because he's the doctor, he knows the medical terminology. They went to school for that, but you are the patient. You are the one who's feeling.
You're at the center there. I like that.
We are the center. We are the, if I am the patient, I decide if I want to do it. You give me the options. And then I say, well, I can do this, I cannot do this. Maybe I need to negotiate with my doctor. I need to have a good conversation. I need to say, oh, what about this and that? Give me the options. What are my options?
What are the options?
But before that, I need to, in my house, make my assignment. I need to know what is the appointment about, what I want to have in that appointment, what is my agenda, and then the doctor have their own agenda and meets the agenda according with the priorities.
I think
am the
that's
center.
such good advice that it's something that we can all take into account. Obi, when you hear Eida speak into these things as this, with the patient as the center and to be prepared, what would it mean for our community to have more preparation around going to the doctor and from a prevention perspective? What would that mean to us?
Yeah, definitely. It would be owning our own health, right? And feeling empowered that we can take control of our own health. You know, it's one thing to go to those healthcare visits and know what to do, but what are things that you can do between healthcare visits? And I think that's the piece that a lot of the people in our community fail to remember and or fail to pay any attention to, right? So you can monitor and track your own blood sugar, your own blood pressure, and your own weight. You know, it's easy to use home glucose monitors to do that. You can use blood pressure monitors and scales that are available at a list of retailers to be able to make sure that your health is in alignment to where your numbers should be. And then if they're not in alignment, then you can go into your healthcare visits with your primary healthcare physician and be more adequately prepared to be able to have that dialogue further on what you may need to do to improve your numbers. And then of course, by keeping track of your numbers in between those healthcare visits, it just allows you to overall be able to manage your health holistically.
I love that. And Tim, when you've worked with a lot of physicians in a lot of clinical areas, what is the role of the clinician in this power that Eida and Obi are speaking of? And what role can they play to help the community and to support the community around heart health?
I think it's a critical opportunity, certainly. Every time a person is interacting with a healthcare professional, particularly as we talked about how that access has been disrupted and that access has been as less frequent than we would have liked, that every time one of those interactions happens, that we're maximizing the opportunity to work with that patient on addressing their health. When we talk about hypertension, the AHA advocates for the MAP framework, and MAP is an acronym, and the P stands for partner with patients. Certainly there's a lot clinicians can do and should do, and we're working to support those efforts as well. But without patient engagement and buy-in, it's not going to have nearly the impact. And so that's one of the reasons, Obi kind of alluded to it, that self-measurement of blood pressure is so important, and equipping patients for that exercise as necessary. And, you know, the clinician then has to help a patient or an individual become comfortable with that, because it can feel a bit foreign, I think, in a lot of cases of, wait a second, blood pressure or something like that that's what I go to somebody to have done. I don't know enough. I didn't go to school for that. And people have a hesitancy around those concepts. So the better the physician, the nurse, the community health worker can help equip that individual to feel comfortable, then they really can take that active role in their own health.
I appreciate you saying so. Yvonne, I've got to ask you, because you roll in this world, but they have all alluded to this idea of power and empowerment. Give us an example where that has really benefited a patient, where that self-power and having supportive people. Give us something.
Well, I can point to something that happened recently on one of the heart healthy nutrition programs that I just recently did, and we were talking about reading labels and, you know, really trying to get a understanding of how to lower your blood pressure. And I asked the question, do you read labels? And one of the guys said, yes, I always read labels. And I said, okay, I had already said, could you take 2 items out of your cupboards? And so he took the 2 items out, and I said, well, what do you do when you read labels? He said, I look at the numbers. I said, you look at the numbers? He said, yeah, I look at the numbers to see what they're giving me. So then I said, what is the first thing you do when you start looking at it? And he said, just look at the number. I said, do you look at the serving size? And he said, no, I never look at the serving size. I said, you never look at the serving size? He says, no. I said, then you don't know what those numbers mean. And he was really caught off guard by that, because he had never thought about what the serving size means in relation to the other numbers. And I said, and those numbers relate to how much is in that serving size. So if you eat that serving size, those numbers are relevant. But if you eat double that serving size, now you've got to double all of those numbers. So we went through, and then he said, oh my God, he went and he took 2 items out, and he started laughing eventually, because at the end I said, well, what was your takeaway? He says, Miss Greer, I'm still standing in front of my cupboards and you got me pulling everything out. He said, it's like a new revelation. He said, now he knows, but he did not know what the relevance of that was. So I think he was thinking that, once he looked at those numbers, the whole entire portion was always those numbers. So I'm saying is that after a while, that empowerment, that freedom. And one other thing is, I always said in that program, this is a safe space. I made this a safe space, that there is no judgment, and you can say and ask whatever question. But I always said, this is about you. This is not about me. This is about you and what you're going to be doing and how you're going to, control your life. So when Eida said that, I wrote down taking ownership of their own health, but also I wrote down relationships, creating a safe space to tell your truth. When you have when you develop that relationship, which many times they say you should have a relationship with your healthcare provider. Sometimes there is no relationship. But when you can develop that relationship, and if the clinician is making the patient the center, that relationship is developed, and it can be very, very, very enhancing and empowering for that individual. I have a lot of takeaways, and when we're ready, I will go through some of these takeaways. But
let's do that, Yvonne, because we are getting near the end today. Our time has gone by so quick. I do have one more question for folks, but I'm going to have you do the takeaways first, okay?
Well, I will start with that takeaway of being prepared for when you go to the doctor's visit is being very important, but also listening to yourself. You should be at the center, so you are really giving people that empowerment to say, yes, it's okay for you to advocate for your own health. When we look at making the healthy choice, I said the easy choice, the default choice, making sure that when we're looking at what are the foods that we are saying should be fed to our children, that they are healthy foods, and that we have a culture that is supporting that healthy food. Owning your health, monitoring and tracking your own health will make a difference and give you that readiness for when you go and visit your doctor. You know how your health picture is and has been, because you know your numbers. That's one thing I always used to preach. Know your numbers. I had people say, if they were something wrong with them, my doctor would tell me. And they just never knew their numbers. So know your numbers, but also to be able to tell the truth. What are the options, and know what the options are, and then be able to make decisions based on the options that you're given. But there is a lot that the MD can do in that area to prepare people to understand how to take your blood pressures. What does these numbers mean? You know, that people can feel confident that they know what they're doing is accurate, help the patient come comfortable with talking about their own BP, understanding what their particular situation is. Because we can say, you know, you're at risk for this or you're at risk for that, but generally, but what is my actual risk? And then you can better have a feel for how you can control your own health. Those were kind of my big takeaways.
Those are awesome, and I appreciate that. You know, I've got one more question for our guest, and I'm going to ask you the same question, Yvonne. But I want to thank Eida Berrios, Nwabuzor, and Tim Nicolai for being guests on the Days of Learning Back to the Kitchen podcast. My question is this, and Eida, I'm going to start with you. What do you hope for the future for our community?
For them to get more knowledge and support.
Thank you. I love that. Obi, what do you hope for the community?
Yeah, I hope that the people in the community understand that, you know, they can live a longer life. Where they currently live doesn't have to depict where they're going or how long they live, and that we all deserve to live longer and healthier lives, no matter our race, creed, or color. And last but not least, I always am going to include a call to action for those who want to, you know, be a part of the Healthy Kids Beverage Default campaign. Feel free to text Milwaukee Kids to 46839.
Thank you, Obi. Tim, what do you hope for the community?
You know, I started off sounding kind of down about COVID and its impact on heart health, but I think there's really an opportunity before us that we don't have to go back to the way things were. Health hit us in the face. We kind of ignored it, many of us, for a long time and just let it exist out there. We couldn't ignore health for the last couple of years, and we don't have to ignore it going forward. So collectively, let's all roll up our sleeves and make health happen in Milwaukee.
Fantastic. Ms. Yvonne, you get the last word. What do you hope for the community?
Well, I hope that, again, that we see over time a total embracement of health and wellness. And that as we collectively come together, because there is so many people working out there in this area, that as we collectively come together, we do create that culture of health that kind of elevates itself, wherein we see a change in the types of foods, culture, physical activity, health habits, all of those types of things. And I actually want to make sure, because I thought Eida might had something that she had burning that she still wanted to say. Did you get everything out?
Yes, I just want to add it a little bit. Just now we have so much technology, and if the patient know how to use it, you know, when they see the provider, the computer is right there. I always say to my patient, ask the doctor, open the lab, show me what is the result. Don't tell me you're doing fine, that's okay. I want the numbers.
Get the numbers. Get the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers. And
That's
you are the one who knows where you want to be.
Yeah, and that is a great way to end, because like it says, we have work to do, but yet there's so many powerful people out here and community champions that I'm just looking forward to our next program as we start embracing our next show, which is really, we want to look at our youth and in supporting our youth in eating healthy. And it's almost as if we're going to be saying eating for life. It's all about you. So they know that they can start, they don't have to wait until they have any health problem. They can start embracing nutrition right now.
Fantastic. And that's a fantastic way to end. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Carrie, for the behind the scenes work. Thank you again to our guests and to all of our listeners. I am David Nelson and Yvonne Greer, and this is the Days of Learning podcast. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.